What's up? My name's Pat Van Dyke, recording artist, producer, live in New Jersey, release a ton of music, produce music for other people, and I've been working with CD Baby since 2005. All right, so been playing music my whole life. 5 or 6, started playing the piano. Was always kind of creating little renditions of kind of imaginary bands as a kid, programming beats on a Casio keyboard and singing into a headphone into my cassette deck. Eventually started playing drums, played in bands through middle school, high school, just always listened to kind of an eclectic mix of music. But would definitely specialize in recording my bands. Like, I was always the guy with the Tascam 424 Porter Studio cassette 4-track, and that was my thing. So in high school, kind of as a vehicle to get better as a musician, I dove into the world of jazz and essentially used it as a vehicle to better hone my craft on the drums. Went to college as a jazz performance major on drums, simultaneously kind of living in the world of live performance and making beats in the early days of like MPC 2000 and Sonic TS10, ASR 10, Korg Triton. So about halfway through college, I stopped taking private drum instruction and kind of focused more on composition, realizing that, you know, it doesn't have to be like hip hop beats, loops, manipulating samples, or real music, right? You can kind of blend these two worlds and compose things with coming from the tradition of jazz, but kind of embracing the sonic aesthetic of hip hop. So after school, graduating, you know, was writing a ton of music. Released my first record in 2005. It was essentially like a band record, right? It was my music, but some instrumentalists, some musicians that I had worked with, bringing the music to life. Did that, played in all the clubs in New York for a bunch of years. Eventually kind of realized that what I was really interested in was kind of producing music, having a blank slate, a blank canvas in front of me and creating something from scratch, being involved in the decision-making process, you know, at every step. So I still play live, I still, you know, do shows, I still gig, I still tour, but my focus is definitely producing music, you know, at home in my studio. Creating tangible things that people can listen to, my own music, producing music for other people, creating sample packs, doing a lot of session work. So first and foremost, I kind of consider myself a recording artist. That's what I focus on, is releasing my own music, but you know, also dabble in many other worlds. So that's the musical side. Myself as an individual, in my early 40s, I live in New Jersey, I'm married, I got 4 kids, you know, do music full time, and that's that. So I would describe my music as kind of straddling the boundaries of like some of the harmonic subtlety of jazz with some of the rhythmic and kind of sonic aesthetic of golden era hip hop. I think I'm influenced by anything and everything. I mean, I listen to country music, I listen to jazz, I listen to classical music, I listen to new hip hop, old hip hop, pop music, everything. But yeah, there's an interview in the Village Voice in like 2013 where Babito Garcia from Stretch and Babito radio show described my record. He said what I perceive the PVD record to be is a jazz record that's produced by someone young enough to have grown up on hip hop. So, and I didn't feed him that quote, right? But that, I was, you know, pleased to hear it. And it is a very intentional, deliberate choice to produce the music in a way that captures that aesthetic, right? I grew up listening to De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest, you know, Jungle Brothers, like golden era, native tongues, hip hop. And the sonic characteristics of that music are they're very signature sound. And it's something that I aim to combine some of the kind of harmonic subtlety, harmonic complexity of jazz with a sonic mixing approach, a sonic production aesthetic that is going to also capture the feeling that one gets when listening to, a Wu-Tang record from 1994, right? And I think a lot of it is connected because some of the records that I'm referring to were made sampling records from the jazz tradition or the soul tradition, right? So yeah, it's an intentional thing, and yeah, I would describe my music as kind of bridging those two worlds. It's not necessarily living in that like lo-fi beat tape world, but it also isn't, it's not going to be on a jazz station, right? It's somewhere in the middle. It's going to kind of hopefully gravitate towards people who appreciate both those styles of music. Obviously, it feels great. It feels like a success. It feels like an achievement when a critic writes a great review, when a song gets placed on a playlist, when a tastemaker DJ reaches out and says, "Hey, I really dig your record," when an individual reaches out and says, "Hey, I really dig your music." It all feels great. At the end of the day, I don't really gauge. I don't really. That doesn't factor into what I'm going to do on a day-to-day basis as a creative artist, right? I want to make music that I like. I want to make music that other people like too. But at the end of the day, I've seen music that I really love kind of fall flat and not gain traction. And I've seen music that I really love get a review on Pitchfork or get a playlist spot, right? So I've stopped kind of really caring in terms of how stuff lands. I'm one individual with a very small, marketing ability. So I can't necessarily, it's not gonna sway me one way or another if something reaches those kind of goals or doesn't reach those goals. And I've had records that kind of don't gain a bunch of traction, don't get placed on playlists, don't sell out. 10 years later get placed on a playlist for the NBA finals, and all of a sudden it's on TV every other night and the royalty checks are flowing in. So I'm going to be doing this regardless of one person's listening or a million people are listening, is the way I look at it. I don't feel like I have much of a choice. Like, this is what I want to do, and this is what I've been doing since I was a little kid. And this is what, how I feel productive, right? Creating things from a blank canvas and having a finished product. So the critical support is great. The achievements are great, but at the end of the day, I'm going to create music that I'm proud of and that I find interesting, and that's a culmination of my influences. Growing up with hip hop influences me in terms of how I want things to sound, and it also influences me in terms of how I'm going to play specific parts. So usually when I sit down to create a piece of music, there's kind of two sides of it. There's the compositional aspect, right? Whether I'm sitting at a guitar, sitting at a piano, there's the chords and the melody and the rhythm and all that stuff, right? The language of the music and the actual composition. Then there's the decision of how I'm going to bring that to life, right? Is it going to be brought to life with a band, with organic instruments, with me playing drums, or am I going to be programming a drum machine? Am I going to be playing bass, or am I going to be playing synth bass? And I think because hip hop, and especially hip hop of that era, has such a very distinct sound, I'm always thinking about the sounds that are going to be incorporated, the sonic palette, right? The kind of the ingredients and the recipe of how I'm going to bring this composition to life. I'm thinking about the textures, the colors that you might hear. So all those things play a huge role in how I'm going to produce the music. So there's the composition side, then there's kind of the production side, and I think I put equal amount of effort into both. I've had compositions fall flat because I didn't produce them the right way, and I also think there's instances where mediocre song can be really effective if produced the right way, mixed the right way. So yeah, I mean, even to the extent of if I'm behind the drum set playing, I'm not only thinking about the lineage of drummers, you know, Tony Williams, Philly Joe Jones, Steve Jordan, whoever. I'm also thinking about kind of the Jay Dillas, the Mad Libs, RJD2, these guys that are programming drums that, you know, they might be chopping up breaks of acoustic drummers and humans, right? But now the way they're interpreting that music and kind of repurposing that music is going to affect the way I'm going to play my instrument. And I'm not the only one. There's plenty of drummers out there who are obviously influenced by non-drummers, right? Or musicians, bass players who are influenced by the way somebody looped a Ron Carter bass line or something. So yeah, hip hop has played a huge influence on my own kind of artistic identity, as has, you know, a lot of the other music that I've listened to. But yeah, sonically, aesthetically, texture-wise, color-wise, it's a huge part of what I'm trying to do. As I've said, I kind of try to blend these two worlds, right? And the organic, real instruments, horns, strings, drums, microphones on cabinets, and you know, real-time recording with, you know, synths, analog synths, digital synths, drum machines, virtual drum machines. Really combining these kind of two worlds is not by accident. It's on purpose, very much so. And you know, these are decisions that are made, right? I might have a melody or a background or a pad or something like that, or a counter melody, and then it's a matter of saying, all right, am I going to play this on a synth? Am I going to write this and have 3 horn players come in and write it in harmony and have it be a more organic thing, right? And I do try to blend those two worlds on purpose, right? If it's programmed drums out of a Linn drum or something, then it might be, you know, acoustic percussion over top, right? So kind of just blending these two worlds, straddling these two styles is very much so on purpose. Really, because a lot of my favorite music was doing the exact same thing, right? Like CTI records, that kind of like Bob James, Eric Gale, all that stuff, where it was kind of like the predecessor of smooth jazz, right? Not a big smooth jazz fan, but like soul jazz, early stuff where it was, and even you know, Herbie Hancock, Headhunters, some of that stuff, where it was very much a jazz record, but they were embracing the technology of synthesizers, which was new at the time, right? So it's these organic instruments, drums, acoustic bass, electric bass, whatever, mixed with Fender Rhodes, mixed with some new synths of the day. So kind of following in that tradition, I think of how I'm going to produce the music, and very often it is a, you know, it's an intentional choice to combine these two sounds, right? So that it can live in both worlds. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. You know, it's like the identity of the music is kind of a gray area at that point, but all the music that I've loved has always kind of lived in that in-between space. So the process is always a little bit different. I generally write and compose at an instrument, typically at the piano, oftentimes at the guitar, less so, you know, with a bass in my hand, but yeah, usually it's at the piano, and then it's a matter of determining, okay, am I gonna program the drums and use a synth bass line, or am I gonna play the drums and record them? And yeah, I am oftentimes combining those two worlds, right? Or maybe I'll take a live drum break that I did, right? Like an organic acoustic drums recorded in my studio with mics, and then processed to sound like an old jazz record. And then I might, instead of using that actual session with those drum tracks, I might just utilize the drum break, right? The kind of stereo composition or stereo wave file, right? And then it'll make me think about it differently. I'll be thinking about it as if I was chopping up somebody else's drum break on a sampler, right? So that process is always a little bit different. And sometimes I'll record things one way and then determine down the road that, all right, you know what, I got to the foundation of of the track might have been acoustic drums, and then I ultimately ditch them, right? And they're no longer there, and it's something entirely different. So the process is always different. In my studio, I've got real instruments. I've got, organ, Fender Rhodes, Wurlitzer electric piano, a whole bunch of drums, a whole bunch of mics. I've also, utilized a bunch of VSTs, virtual instruments. I also will, utilize samples of my own stuff. So it's kind of anything and everything goes, and it's all there at my disposal to use when I see fit, So the PVD Break series really was almost like it. So it's evolved. 2009 or 10, I think I put the first one out, and it really was kind of so I could teach myself how to make acoustic drums sound like old records that the producers of the 90s and 2000s were sampling, right? I could play that stuff, but I couldn't make it sound like Synthetic Substitution or Funky Drummer or Impeach the President or any of these classic breaks that have been kind of become part of the subconscious of that whole style of music and that genre. So it began really as a way for me to say, okay, I'm gonna learn how to make this stuff sound old and like it's saturated on on analog tape, or I'm going to make it sound, like it's pulled off a vinyl record. So it started as kind of an exercise for myself, and nowadays there's everybody and their brother is doing drum break packs. I was not the first person to do it, but the market was way less saturated at that point when I was doing it. And it really also felt like, to me, it was almost like a business card. It was like a way for me to open doors and hopefully get in circles that I couldn't otherwise be in. If I could get someone to get one of these drum break packs into Pete Rock's hand, right? Maybe I could have a dialogue with Pete Rock. Or if I could get, get these files to Madlib, it would be a way for me to get in touch and kind of open that door. And it's done just that. These breaks have been on records all over the place. Some independent, some bigger, some smaller. It eventually led me to a relationship with Redefinition Records and like Damu the Fudge Monk and some of these artists. They repressed the first 2 volumes on vinyl. Years later, then that wound up on a BBC masterclass special with Mark Ronson, right? I had no idea he even knew the records existed, and a buddy of mine sent me a clip from the BBC masterclass where Mark Ronson picks up the PVD Breaks Volume 1 on vinyl and does like a 30-minute masterclass on sampling drum breaks, right? So that was kind of where it started. Started as a way for me to learn the skills, right? To kind of hone my craft, and also to hopefully put me in touch with people that I wanted to be working with. Since then, it's kind of developed into, a revenue stream for sure. And, a way for me to be part of the creative process of other artists, right? I do enjoy that. I do enjoy seeing what other people make with this stuff, which is great. But yeah, it's opened some doors. Usually when I'm dealing with the producers who are then shopping these beats or these songs to artists, they ask me, what are you looking for? Production credit, just publishing, writer's credit, a check, and it seems like it's a little bit of a moving target at all times. I mean, this kind of ties into what we were saying about like that Pulse Boutique and DJ Shadow era. It's like nowadays people are creating melodic and harmonic and like original samples, which, they're selling them with the purpose of having producers sample them. And they don't have to, they do have to clear it, but it's a little different than if they found something on a record at a record shop and then have to go hunt down that label. These people are creating these with the sole purpose of being sampled. Okay, so that evolved quite a bit, right? First 2 records, Technicolor Hi-Fi, Right on Time, were records where I wrote the music and then trusted my friends and fellow musicians to kind of bring it to life. And that was a great experience. And the musicians on those records are all very successful, and I owe a lot to them for bringing that music to life. Between the second record and the third record, I think I became more of a micromanager, control freak, and really wanted to be able to have every step in the process there be a decision making, there be a choice. Is it going to be like this or is it going to be like that? You know, thinking about every aspect of, all right, am I going to play the bass with my fingers or my thumb or a pick? Am I going to play the bass muted, or am I going to let it ring out, right? Is this going to be live drums or is this going to be acoustic drums? Is this going to be a piano or is this going to be, you know, a synth pad? So on Hello Summer, the record that's probably been the most successful of mine, that's where I kind of really dove headfirst into producing it more like a hip hop record, where with the exception of soloists, like a featured trumpet solo or a featured piano solo, every aspect of the music was me. And that just made it that much more sound like me, right? Because like I said, every single step, every single choice to be made, I made. There wasn't like an incredible bass player there to play it how they would interpret it, or an incredible piano player to play it how they would interpret it. It was all my interpretations of my own compositions and my decisions at each and every one of those steps. And you know, I enjoy collaborating. I've had a bunch of collaborations with people that I really trust, but the process is entirely different than stuff that I'm going to put my name on and release as a Pat Van Dyke release. So yeah, that evolved, I think, as I became more confident on the other instruments. Like, I grew up playing piano. I consider myself a drummer first and foremost. Like, if you see me perform, 90% of the time I'm going to be sitting behind the drums, not sitting at the piano or the guitar. But I'm a, you know, competent bass player, piano player, guitar player, and therefore have access to all sorts of other instruments through, you know, VSTs and whatnot. But yeah, horn players, string players, I'll write the parts, I'll write the arrangements, and have them play it and record it and produce it in the way that I see the final product. So yeah, and then nowadays it's kind of backwards. Now I write and record the music and produce it, and then have to teach a band how to play it, right? Which is entirely different and presents a different set of challenges. But then there's also the thing of like, should I be performing this music with a band, or should I be performing this music with like an Ableton set and like a, you know, push, you know, like queuing things up? Am I a DJ or am I a musician? So yeah, sometimes getting a live band of 6 or 7 or 8 people to do all the things exactly like I did on a recording is difficult. So I try to just embrace it as 2 separate things, right? It's like a live interpretation of this recording. Just as, like, you know, if you went to see Miles Davis play, you weren't going to hear, you know, the same way they played on Bitches Brew. They were going to do something different every night. So yeah, I kind of look at them as 2 separate entities and 2 separate ways to interpret the same composition, right? So there's been a lot of moments that made me realize one thing or another, right? I had spoken before about kind of like achieving these levels of success, right? And feeling like, oh, you know, this might be it, right? Like, oh, I've made it. Well, you know, that goalpost continues to move farther back or whatever, right? It's like I celebrate all the little wins, right? Yesterday, FUV here in New York played a new single I dropped on Friday, right? On FM radio. I listen to FUV every day, right? It felt great. Is that going to be, you know, the key to my success? Not necessarily, right? Everything's kind of just a little building block. The Pitchfork review, the Mark Ronson thing, right? But I think the what I learned from all that is that it's not going to be one thing. It's kind of like, just, you know, I'm going to continue doing this, whether, I said before, whether there's 1 person listening or 1 million people listening. And really, some of my favorite artists were not celebrated when they were releasing music. Shuggy Otis is like one of my biggest inspirations. I don't think he was very successful when he put out Inspiration Information, right? Like, that record is celebrated now as a cult classic, but it's really like, he's creating this body of work, this catalog of music, that's his legacy. And that's how I feel what I'm doing, right? Whether it's something that gets celebrated now or 20 years from now or never, I'm okay with it, because it's, you know, it's all kind of like little building blocks, little steps in the progression towards, you know, the ultimate goal. And, you know, just like I identify as like a recording artist and someone who makes a habit and a routine of being creative. So that's what I'm going to continue to do. So yeah, it's like celebrate all those wins, but also I think that the reality of it, or the experience that I learned from it, is that, you know, it's a process, and it's going to continue going on, and, you know, I'm happy to be able to do it. I started with CD Baby in 2005 when I put out my first record. CDs were very much a thing then, right? And we needed somebody to kind of, you know, stock the inventory and ship them out, and a place to direct people to. And when we would play shows in Manhattan, have a credit card swiper they used to provide me with. Yeah, so I've been with CD Baby for the long haul, from the minute I started releasing music in, you know, in that sense, and I've been happy the whole time. It's been a very seamless, easy transition from the world of CDs to iTunes to, you know, what it is now. The upload process is really easy. The customer service is awesome. The CD Baby creator services that they provided me now is incredible. I mean, the ability to kind of have access to someone who can help you pretty much in real time is huge. I do like I do prefer the CD Baby model than the subscription model, because like I've said, like I've had songs that have become very much successful well after they were released, where if I had to continue to pay even if it is a $20 a month or whatever it is, I could easily think like, all right, you know what? It's not my proudest work. I made it 15 years ago. It's not really generating any traction or income. Why not just take that record down? And never having to think about that or make that choice, because it's a kind of pay once and it exists forever. I definitely prefer that model. Yeah, I've had nothing but positive things to say about CD Baby. I tell everybody else, you know, that I think it's a great route to go. Very helpful customer service, and just, you know, really easy user interface too. Being independent is very much important to me. I've worked with labels. I also run a small label. I have the ability to kind of release music that I believe in, which I think is important. I've never had someone tell me, you know, this album's missing a single, or this song doesn't belong on there, or you shouldn't be collaborating with this artist. So, as I've said so far a bunch of times today, like the ability to make these decisions is very much important to me. Make the decisions in how the song comes to life, in how you're going to produce the song and how you're going to mix the song. So the ability to kind of determine the release strategy is very much important to me. I also think that, you know, labels need to bring something to the table and provide something, and the music landscape has changed so much in the past 15 years. I mean, 25 years, I don't know. 5 years it's changed, you know, it's ever evolving. So, you know, if the goal is to get your music up on the DSPs, and a label's not putting money behind marketing or pressing physical product, you know, what are they bringing to the table? And that's not to say the labels don't bring something to the table, some do, but just having that kind of direct from me to CD Baby as the distributor to the end user, it seems very streamlined, and the ability to also kind of not have to factor in sync placements, right? If my publisher's finding sync placements, or I'm finding sync placements, or someone reaches out to me about using my song in a TV show, I'm not having to factor in a label getting 50% of that, right? You know, if the label brought the client in or brought the sync placement in, then by all means they're entitled to a piece of that. But if, you know, they're finding my music from hearing it out there in the wild, being independent retains my ability to kind of take more of the pie, you know? So yeah, I think being independent is real important for me at this point in my career. Earlier on, I was very much wanting to work with labels, reaching out to labels, and, you know, Stone's Throw and all these labels that I look up to, and I still do. But I think what makes them really cool is that they're independent and they kind of like, stylistically don't have an identity, right? Like they're all over the map and they're not trying to do one thing. And they are, you know, Stone's Throw, Mellow Music Group, these type of labels, they are very much independent labels. They're not major labels. They're able to make their own decisions and, you know, cater to what they want to put out there. At the end of the day, like, I'm content being able to exist and pay my bills from music. So, you know, it's, yeah, I mean, I think everyone would embrace more success, but my goal was never to be like rich and famous. It would be more like rich would be cool, but you know, successful, comfortable. But yeah, I would also still like to be able to, like, you know, I'd never have any goal of like not being able to walk down the street. Like, you know, I mean, I think of guys like DJ Premier. All right, he's famous, and I'm sure he's been compensated well for all his work, but I think he could walk around in Manhattan, and, you know, and some people would know who he is. I would know who it is. You would know who he is, but you know, he can go out with his family to dinner, I'm sure.